Hello and welcome back. I seem a little groggy today. I spent 19 hours yesterday working at the polls. I'm a little tired. I have not said a lot about the elections lately because, well, they've been going on. Things change too fast. But election day is over. Everybody's expecting Trump to make his big announcement to run for president again. Everybody is looking forward. Well, not everybody. Actually, I don't even think any of the Republicans, except maybe the ones that have a freezer temperature level IQ, are looking forward to it. Let's see, what do we get? What headlines do we have from yesterday? Here's one from ABC News. Trump left fuming after at least 14 of his candidates falter in midterms. Donald, wake up, dude. If your mouth didn't already turn people off, it's one thing to win a primary where only half of the voters in a state, by and large, are voting. It's another thing to have to come off against the entire state. Here's another one. Here's a great one from Raw Story. Furious Trump is pinning blame on Melania for his decision to back Dr. Oz. Donald. You don't get to claim the laurels all the time without accepting the fact that, sometimes you're going to lose. And blaming everybody else for you losing, well, that just sounds like you're a 4-year-old. I really don't believe that Melania had anything to do with him choosing Dr. Oz. We saw a trend forming early on. J.D. Vance, okay? Trump backed him. Millionaire, best-selling author. Dr. Oz, celebrity. Look at the number of people who had some celebrity status that Donald Trump endorsed, and you begin to see a pattern. He's enamored with fame, and he wants to live in everybody else's glow. You lost the election, Donald. Get over it. Blaming everybody else because you made a bad decision just makes you look, well, like I said, stupid. It also didn't help that after you made all these endorsements, it came out that you were you had secret documents you shouldn't have had, and let's face it, you left them unlocked and unsecured for 15 months until somebody from the National Archive and Records Administration told you you had to put a padlock on them. You didn't care. You didn't care about America. You don't care about America now. You care about Donald Trump. And it's becoming more and more obvious every day. Jesus Christ. I can think of somebody who should have been crucified on a cross. Or should be. From People magazine. Trump reportedly livid, screaming at everyone over midterm results as prominent Republicans speak out. I'm pretty sure when you got that, MBA that you had to do some economics because like a sophomore year, freshman year economics class in college says that you can't run any enterprise at a profit, at winning rates forever. It equals out in the end. It always has to. You can't win every time. And if you lose, you lose. If your chosen candidate loses, they lose. Accept it. Don't rant and rave about it. From Newsweek. This one, maybe he's trying to avoid everything by dying. I don't know. But this is from Newsweek. Donald Trump urged to evacuate Mar-a-Lago before Hurricane Nicole hits. Folks, I don't know about you, but me, personally, if I had my own custom painted 757 and there was a hurricane coming, I wouldn't have to be told. I'd have been out of there. I'd have been gone. While he's hanging on, maybe he wants to have the world's biggest hurricane party. I don't know. Maybe he wants to try playing golf in a heavy breeze. That wouldn't surprise me either. Here's a wonderful one from Salon. I should not be blamed at all. Trump throws his MAGA candidates under the bus after midterm losses. Again, accept it. Most of the times, neither the House, except, okay, after the Civil War, I'll give you that much, there's never normally been a huge divide in either chamber. It might happen for a couple of years, but it usually rights itself. And you come down to an area where, okay, one might, in the House, one might have 15 to 20, 25 seats more than the other. Rarely do you end up with a veto-proof majority, because about half of America thinks one way and half of America thinks another, and that's how the system works. And the fact that you blather all the time, it turns people off, man. People hate it. Nobody likes a braggart. From the Daily Dot. Trump claims massive voter fraud in all 3 states he claimed fraud in 2020. Now this is, only the diehard are going to believe you. You are really successfully proving to America that you do not have the right character to be president. You claimed fraud once. All over the country. And what did you get? Investigation after investigation after investigation after investigation that showed that no fraud. The greatest number of cases for voter fraud brought in any one state was 6. That might swing a small town, race for city council. It's not going to swing a statewide seat or a statewide election. Quit talking about it. Find something cogent, something that affects America. Some Republicans saying, well, Biden inflation, Biden inflation, Biden inflation. You do realize that a lot of people get their news from the net. And I'll admit it, I use Microsoft Start. It is a great news aggregator. It covers both ends of the spectrum. And you're seeing articles that this inflation cycle is not limited to the United States. It's a worldwide problem. I don't see how you can blame all the inflation, because guess what? As inflation happens in another country, prices go up. And if they're importing to us, those prices go up. We pay more because we have to. We can't get resources from people at 1950s rates in 2022. And if you think 8% is a bad inflation rate in America, and it's far from good. I guarantee I'm a fixed income. It's far from good. Recently saw an article that in Turkey, our 8.3%, they would kill for it because you can move the decimal point over one to the right because they're at 83% inflation. We're not anywhere near the worst in the world. But the entire world is going through an inflationary cycle right now. Just the way it is. From Mediate. Trump on Republican candidates. If they win, I should get all the credit. And if they lose, I should not be blamed. You can't have it both ways, dude. You just can't. You take the credit when you win, and you take the blame if you lose. That's the way of the world. That's the way a man, an adult, behaves and thinks. I should get all the credit if they win. Nah. Give the candidates themselves a lot of credit, because no matter what you say, if you endorse an idiot, the people in that state are going to know they're an idiot, and they're going to lose. Or if you endorse a beloved candidate, they would win no matter who's running against them. You don't get credit for that, but you can claim some because, hey, you endorsed them. If they lose, I should not be blamed. Well, I can give you that one. You endorsed J.D. Vance. He won in Ohio. I didn't think he was the best choice, even among the Republicans. The fact is, your endorsement got him over the top because he was trailing up to the day of the endorsement. And he won. But you also endorse people in their primaries who were trailing and suddenly shot ahead because of your endorsement, and they lost. It's like going to the horse track, man. You go to the pari-mutuel windows. Sometimes you pick a winner and sometimes you pick a loser. Again, economics. 50%. You can't run at a winning rate forever. You're going to lose sometimes. Dear me. Dear me, dear me, dear me. Is this the best the country can do? Well, he just wanted to shed the blame if they lost. Well, this from Business Insider. Republicans are blaming Trump after GOP's midterm red wave failed to materialize. Even people who thought, a lot of people who thought you should have won but didn't, willing to give your endorsement a lot of weight. But when pictures come out of top secret documents and stuff laying out on the floor next to your desk come out, that you are that cavalier with government documents that, one, you shouldn't have had anyways, and two, should have known. Even, okay, you wanted to use the dossier on Macron to blackmail him to get something you wanted. Fine, great. Lock it up. Hide it under the bed. I don't know. But if you just leave it lay out on the floor, that really makes people go, maybe we made a mistake. And then they start looking at who you endorsed. And then they start thinking, you know what? Maybe this guy's a mistake too. And I'm going to get off the elections, but I'm not going away from the topic of Trump. You've heard these people say that, well, Ukraine wouldn't have happened if Trump was there. Really? A while back, he said that Ukraine should trade territory for peace. In diplomatic terms, that's called appeasement. Did he never read a high school history book? No. Okay. My better question should be, did he ever read, period? But did he ever read his high school history book? Trading territory for peace was tried back in 1938 with Adolf Hitler. How well did that turn out, Donald? You're talking about dealing with Vladimir Putin, who said the worst thing that ever happened to the world was the fall of the Soviet Union. And by extension, you can, by extension of his actions, it can safely be assumed that he's trying to rebuild the Soviet Union. And what kind of people were the Soviet Union? And what's that say for our NATO allies in Europe? What's that say for Europe, period? And for the world in general? How did the Soviet Union treat people who weren't Soviets, who weren't Russians? You know, not in June of 1953, Germany was really beginning to come out of the Second World War. The rebuilding was going on. And you look at East Berlin, it was actually lagging behind West Berlin, as pretty much did a lot of communist areas after the war that could be compared to areas that weren't communist. It was getting pretty hard. They tried to cram Sovietization policies down East Germans, and one has to bear in mind that while Belarus and Ukraine, and part of the lower Volga over to where Volgograd or Stalingrad is today, did take a horrible pounding during that war, and cities were destroyed, the vast majority of the Soviet Union was still in good shape. And that aided a lot in their recovery. East Germany, period, had probably any town over 100,000 people pounded into rubble. And Berlin was one of the worst hit. And they're trying to rebuild. And they're putting a lot of quotas on workers, and the pay was abysmal. The hours were terribly long. And remember, a lot of these people remembered what it was like before. Yes, they lost a lot of young men, but a lot of young men came home. And they'd had about enough. In June of 53, you started seeing strike action. You started seeing protests. And instead of what would happen in a liberal democracy, listening to the demands and trying to see if something could be done, if they were reasonable demands or if they were unreasonable and unworkable, the Soviet Union was still in charge of East Berlin and would in effect be up until the wall came down. And they just saw that this was absolutely not acceptable. Demonstrations broke out in over 500 towns and villages for several days. their way of dealing with it was to send in motorized infantry and tanks. This will work some for pushing people back, and some of the less courageous or more intelligent, I guess you could say, people would see this and go, you know what, I don't like working real hard, but these people leveled our city 8 years ago, and I don't see them not doing it again. They took off, but the hardcore ones that were going like, no, we are not, you just upped our work quotas by 10%, and they were already outrageous to begin with, stood their ground. Now, if you know anything about riot dispersal, I have friends who trained as National Guardsmen when I was in the Army at Fort Benning. And, we went off to learn how to work mortars or fire tow missiles or whatever. They learned how to break up a riot. And no, they don't use guns. They may fix bayonets if necessary, but their big thing was that you push the crowd. You push the crowd out of a confined area into an area where they can disperse. And if you don't do that, they just keep coming back. What the Soviets did is they kept pushing the workers into a tighter and tighter packed area. And when they wouldn't leave, you just created a tighter crowd than you started with. The warning, disperse or we will shoot. And they're going, yeah, right. Figure, the infantry's going to open up, and some of us may take a hit. Well, they opened up on them all right, but it wasn't the infantry, it was the tanks. T-34 isn't much of a tank now, but it had a 85 millimeter gun back then. A whole bunch of people died that day. And there were a few gunners who were in their tanks and said, we're not going to shoot at unarmed civilians. They were not court-martialed for their refusal to disobey orders. They were, however, shot in the head by their commanders, who then took over the guns and started firing. That's the type of people that Putin wants to bring back. Most people don't know about the East German uprising, and it's a sad thing. It's painful reading. But let's go on to the ones that they did know about. Let's go forward 3 years and a little bit to the south. And again, people were being worked too hard. The pay was abysmal. The living standards were crap. And the young, we'll call them the intelligentsia, the ones in college, knew that there was more to the world than what they were being fed in their classrooms. And they came up with a list of 16 demands for political economic reform of the society in Ukraine, in Hungary, in Hungary. They come with their demands. What happens here? Somebody goes out and talks to them. They take the list. They placate them. They go home. They look at the list and go, yeah, 1 or 2 we can probably do, but the rest of them, no. What was the solution in in Hungary that was dominated by a Stalinist government, all 16 were arrested. Simple. And when other people went to demand their release, policemen from the state security authority just opened up on them. No tear gas, no riot batons, just bullets. And that will go on. That was the 23rd of October, and that will go on to the 10th of November. And it's a terrible thing to think about, you know, people fighting so hard that they're willing to risk their lives. Maybe they got some rifles, maybe they got some pistols, they got Molotov cocktails, and not a whole lot else. They ended up facing almost the entire I'm trying to read this. I did not prepare a script. Please bear with me. Well, like I said, this started the 23rd of October. Around November 3rd, the Soviets started moving. They had 5 divisions already in the country. They reinforced them with a total of 17 additional divisions by the time it was all said and done. Most of the Hungarian army had, well, they were loyal to the Hungarian government. And when the protesters had deposed the communist government, they remained loyal to the Hungarian government, the new Hungarian government. However, they were primarily an infantry army. And while that might do really good for, you know, urban warfare, the fact is, by the time it really got started, the Soviets had the entire 8th Mechanized Army in there, which is a very, you know, heavy on armed personnel carriers and were very heavy on tanks. And, yeah, they just started shooting the place up. They offered, you know, so, oh yeah, okay, we'll withdraw, yeah, you're cool, you know, we understand you want to leave in Warsaw Pact, and, you know, we're good with that. And all that was done was to buy time. They lied through their teeth, like the Soviets always did, like communists always do. And let's face it, let's not kid ourselves. Vladimir Putin is a frickin' communist. No matter what he says, he was a communist born and bred. He still is. He still believes in that. And one of the most famous quotes from any communist leader was from Chairman Mao, who said, "All power resides in the muzzle of a gun." And, yeah. They rounded up, and there were over 1,600 civilians killed. And that's not really to say how many actual protesters were killed. Because when you're talking about a situation like this, you're not considering the protesters and the freedom fighters as civilians. It's people not taking part. They ended up with 2,500 dead of the fighters, Hungarian fighters, and 20,000 wounded, and a whole bunch of people put into Soviet labor camps. Technically, it was no longer the NKVD, which set up the Gulag system. It was now the KGB. A name, a rose is a rose by any other name. They still ran the camps. And they would run the camps until the end of communism in Russia. But yeah, people wanted freedom. People wanted self-determination. And the Soviet Union, the group that Trump's friend Putin wants to reinvigorate, bring back to life, had no problem with killing people that disagreed with them. That was one of the reasons that Yugoslavia never joined the Warsaw Pact. They were a communist country, but they knew to join the Warsaw Pact meant that they would not be in control of their country. Moscow would be. And Bras Tito said, "No, I believe in communism, but I believed we should determine how we do communism, not Moscow." Heck, went 56. Let's jump ahead 8 years to the Prague Spring. This time, same. People wanting better living conditions, better wages, more freedom of the press, more freedom of speech. And they fought for it. They were willing to fight for it. And, well, one could say the liberalization that led to what was called the Prague Spring started January 5th, 68. And it would go on for several months. Brezhnev was the leader of the Soviet Union, and while he was willing to be as harsh as anybody else, he knew that he needed ties with the West, and that he wasn't getting them. So they let the Prague Spring go on until the 21st of August. What did they want in Czechoslovakia? They wanted to do away with socialism and communism. Not really. They wanted what they called socialism with a human face. You know, how they define that, how anybody defines something like that, we'll never know. We never got to find out how it would work out. Because this time, the Russians weren't going to take it all on themselves. So they said. Let's see, who all did they bring in to help? They brought in troops from obviously Soviet Union, Poland, Bulgaria, Hungary. And there were other countries that were part of the Warsaw Pact and simply said, you know what? No. Nah, we're not taking part. They wanted East Germans, East Germans lent support because even the communists from the Soviet Union were smart enough to know that, sending Germans in is just going to make matters worse, because they kind of took over the country some years back. So they didn't send in East German troops. But it had unintended consequences, which we'll get to in a minute. But, yeah, they brought in, again, what now amounts to an army, an entire army, 20 divisions with 2,000 tanks, 800 aircraft, and in the end, at its peak, they had 400,000 Soviet troops, 80,000 troops from Poland, Bulgaria, and Hungary, and 6,300 tanks. The time they got done, they had almost a 2-to-1 advantage over the Czechoslovakian forces. And it had profound effects. While they had open borders during the Prague Spring, about 70,000 of the best and brightest knew after 53 and after 56 that the communists, the Soviets, were not going to let this stand. And they got the hell out of Dodge. They lost their best and brightest. The ones that were smart enough to see that, you know what, it's not going to stand. If it does stand, hey, we can come back. But odds are it's not going to stand. And it didn't. Again, all power comes from the muzzle of a gun. And they proved it. Once again, they proved it. They killed and imprisoned a whole bunch of people. Now, if you're smart enough to know who all were members of the Warsaw Pact, you'll recognize that there were some names missing. The two of them were Albania and Romania. And they wanted no part of it. And it came down to the People's Republic of Albania formally withdrew from the Warsaw Pact in September of '68. They joined Yugoslavia as a non-aligned communist state. There were a few, not many. And if you remember, I said that one of the other communist countries, members of the Warsaw Pact, that didn't take part in the invasion of Czechoslovakia was Romania. At the time, the head was Nicolae Ceausescu. Anybody who's read about that, he was not a nice man. But he didn't want anything to do with that invasion, and he refused to participate. He not too many years after that, Romania became the only communist country that was doing, well, besides Yugoslavia, of course, that was doing most all of its trade with non-communist countries. And even something that was just simple. The Soviets wanted to build a railway from Odessa in Ukraine to Varna in the east of Romania. And there were probably two good reasons for this. One, it could be used to bring in more troops and force Moscow's terms. The other thing was, it was useless to them. Soviets use a broad gauge. Don't ask me the exact measurement. It's wider than the rails you see here in the U.S., which are standard gauge, which is what most of Europe is. Why do I need a railroad that I can't really use? Was probably what he was going through Ceausescu's mind at the time. And he said, no, that only serves you. It doesn't serve me. Yeah, there were a lot of falling out from the Prague Spring. If you remember, in 1980, we refused to go to the Moscow Olympics because of the invasion of Afghanistan. Well, in 84, with the Los Angeles Olympics, the Soviets come up with some bullshit reason that they were not coming because of possible terrorist threats. And none of the Warsaw Pact countries came except Romania, because they're like, you're full of shit. There is not a problem with that. It would end up leading to what Moscow wanted least: the diminution of their power. When Albania pulled out of the Warsaw Pact, they got a free pass on it. And why? Well, to invade Albania, they'd have had to go through Romania, which wanted absolutely nothing to do with invading other countries just because Moscow wanted to, and it would have put them up against the one man that, Joseph Stalin tried to kill 27 times. He sent 27 assassins to Zagreb in Yugoslavia to try to kill Marshal Tito. And finally, Tito got tired of this. That wouldn't have taken me 27 times. But he sent a note to Stalin. You have sent 27 men here to kill me. 27 times you've tried to kill me. And 27 times they failed. If you do it one more time, I will send one man to Moscow to kill you, and he won't fail. Well, anything that could put the fear of God, any man who could put the fear of God into Joseph Stalin was someone not to be fucked with. And Albania at that time bordered on Yugoslavia. So he'd have had his hands full. Or Brezhnev in this case would have had his hands full trying to force Romania or Albania back into the fold. And it's like, first I got to fight my way there, then I got to fight with them, and then I got to fight with people that I don't want anything to do with me, which means they're going to fight even harder. Nah, I'm losing control here. I'm going to cut my losses. Have a nice life, Albania. Putin wouldn't have stopped there. He'd have just kept right on driving. Even if it meant the complete destruction of his army, he'd have kept on driving. This is the man that Trump says, well, Ukraine should have made a deal with him. I don't know about you, but when someone wants my soul and my testicles just so he'll leave me alone, it ain't gonna happen. Not going to do it. Oh, and up yours. Trump's a fool. If we didn't know that before he ran against Hillary Clinton, we sure as hell know it now. Anyway, I do hope he runs again, because he's going to be running against Mike Pence. Really, he'd be a dark horse candidate for the nomination for sure. And Ron DeSantis. And they both can say one thing that Donald Trump can't. I have experience as a head of state. I have experience dealing with governmental bureaucracy. I have experience at rules making. I have the ability to work with the other side of the aisle. I have the ability to work with people who don't necessarily like my policies or whatever. And after this election, I'm pretty sure that when he comes up against, especially DeSantis, and I don't think DeSantis would be the best president we could have. He sure as hell would be a better president than Donald Trump, simply because he knows the limitations of his power. Yeah, I want to see Trump run again. I want to see him run against DeSantis and some other governors. And I want to see him lose in a way that he can't blame voter fraud, that he can't blame the other guy, that he has to take all the blame himself. And it'll be a beautiful day when that happens. And hey, you know what? I've ranted on long enough. Y'all have a nice day. Enjoy the weather. And beat Michigan.